Master of Darkness was developed by Sims, published by Sega, and was released on the Sega Master System in Europe in 1993. It is known in Japan as In the Wake of Vampire, and Vampire Master of Darkness in North America, but was only released on the Game Gear in these countries. In this review, I will only be covering the Sega Master System version, even though the Game Gear version seems to be the same, but playing at 60Hz instead of 50Hz, so the gameplay is a little bit smoother and the music is much faster. Master of Darkness stars protagonist Dr. Ferdinand Social, who while using a Ouija board one night during a full moon receives a clue about killings that have been happening around London as of late. The clue points to a killer vampire. This vampire is none other than Count Dracula. The message also tells the Doctor to go to the Thames River to find answers. This is where the journey to find Count Dracula begins. There are 5 stages in Master of Darkness, and they are each quite different from one another. From the Thames River all the way to Dracula's castle is a trek filled with enemies, traps, and labyrinths. This game borrows heavily from the style of the first Castlevania games, and is honestly one of the best clones of those games that I've played in recent years. Instead of using a whip though, the good doctor uses a variety of primary weapons, like a knife, a cane, a rapier, and an axe. The knife is pretty much worthless because of its limited range and low damage, so finding a new weapon as soon as possible was the first thing I wanted to do. The cane, rapier, and axe are all pretty good weapons, so the only one I tried to avoid grabbing at all costs was the knife. The only issue is, if the doctor dies, he loses his weapon and goes back to the knife. He also uses sub-weapons like a revolver, bombs, a boomerang, and stakes. These have a limited number of uses, but more ammunition for them can be picked up along the way. There are tons of floating masks in every stage that contain either weapons, sub-weapons, health potions, extra lives, gems that cause all enemies on the screen to die, or even bonus points. Master of Darkness also follows Castlevania with the trend of hiding items in walls, and this helps the player a lot when it comes to refilling health because I found a lot of health potions in walls. Dr. Social controls really well for the most part, with being able to actually control his jump after making it, which was an issue in the first few Castlevania games. He can also crouch walk to get through tight spaces. The controls feel good, so I don't really have any complaints there. I do wish some of the enemies weren't quite so annoying though, but I'll get to those in a minute. If I did have to make a complaint about controls, it would be that I wished it was easier to get onto stairs. Finding that sweet spot took some practice. Enemies in the game are everything from well-dressed men who brandish pistols, dogs, bats, floating specter women, zombies, men with bad posture who like to jump at you, poltergeists who throw paintings, candlesticks, knives, tables, and chairs at the player, all the way to even skeletons with swords. Most of these enemies are easy to defeat and are only an issue in large numbers, except the bats and the flying knives. Bats are exceptionally small, quick, and have quite a few patterns they can follow when they attack. They really like to attack the Doctor when he's on stairs, and the game is absolutely full of stairs. The knives are tiny, so they're hard to hit, and they're very quick with their attacks as well. I found these 2 enemies to be the worst in the game for me. Overall though, the game isn't too difficult if you're used to Castlevania style games. It has a good amount of challenge without being too frustrating. Each stage has a boss fight at the end, and these are honestly a bit more standard than they should have been. 3 of the 6 fights are against a Count who's trying to resurrect Dracula, and even though each fight is different, I do wish they'd been a little bit more varied. Same with the final fight, it just felt like kind of a letdown. Now, I'm not saying the bosses are terrible, or even really bad, but I do think they could have been better. The stages are decently varied for the first half of the game, and then some of the second half turns into kind of an odd mishmash of blocks and stairs, leading in just about every direction. I do like the fact that the developers tried to get you to find the right way out while the timer is ticking down, because it adds a little bit of stress to the gameplay, but sometimes it just felt like it wasn't as well thought out as it could have been. Again, this doesn't really bring down the game's enjoyment in my opinion, but it was just something I noticed. The graphics are good, with large sprites that are clear and detailed. The animations are nice and smooth, and look great for an 8-bit title. The story is told with still frames and text, so there's nothing super fancy there, but that's okay. All in all, I really like the presentation of the graphics in this game. Sounds and music are good for the most part, with the exception being the rooms where you get locked in and have enemies attacking from all over the place. These have an alarm-like sound that just grates on the nerves very fast. I had to turn down my volume during these sections, and they happen a few times throughout the game. The sounds overall were just kind of standard 8-bit style sounds of things getting smacked, picked up, or exploding. And as far as the music goes, the songs were pretty memorable and fit the mood of the game well. All in all, I think the sound and music for the most part was enjoyable. And the music on the Game Gear version sounds a lot different because it's just faster in tempo. So, would I recommend Master of Darkness? Yes, I would. It's a fun title from the era and one I didn't even know about until about 2 years ago while I was looking through titles from systems I didn't have as a kid. I also didn't know that this was available on Game Gear until just a few days ago when I beat the game. I think this game is overlooked and deserves to be checked out. It plays really well and it's a really great way to kill an hour or two, or more if you aren't used to these types of games. I think the game really has something important. It has atmosphere. Everything feels really dark, gritty, and spooky. It's the perfect game to play in October, and I wish there were even more games like it. So if you can find a way to play it, then I recommend doing so if you're a fan of Castlevania-style horror action platformers, because this one needs more love.